an editor friend said, "Why do you still call the Philippines home?" And he'd also grown up in the Philippines. And I remember responding with, uh, because I was ripped from it. And
Mhm,
so there's still an unfinished salvage to that whole part of my life.
mhm,
And I think that's true for us all. For home is not static. Home might not
mhm,
even be one place. Home often comes with ruptures, right? Not everyone
mhm,
has had a brain aneurysm rupture, but everyone has experienced some kind of rupture.
mhm,
Uh, for many of us, the places or people we consider home, or the places and people we think of when we hear the word home,
mhm.
those places very much have stories that feel unfinished. I think that's true for so many of us. Um, we're all still reconciling something. And if you're reconciling something with somewhere, that somewhere is likely home to you one way or another.
This is Storied Account with Jen Jumba. In conversations with writers, something magical happens, and as readers, we begin to see them as human beings and not just the name on the spine of a book. My hope is through these conversations, when you learn about their craft and them as a person, you'll become like me, fiercely loyal, want to read their current book, entire backlist, any future book, or any book they blurb. And when you see their name, you'll want to support them, not only as the incredible storytellers, but also the thoughtful individuals you have come to know. And I'm super honored today because my guest is Cinelle Barnes, a formerly undocumented memoirist, essayist, and educator from Manila in the Philippines. She is the author of Monsoon Mansion, a memoir, Malala, Essays on Freedom, and she's also the editor of the New York Times new and noteworthy book, A Measure of Belonging, 21 Writers of Color on the New American South. Cinelle earned her MFA in creative nonfiction from Converse College. Her writing has appeared or been featured in, hold on a sec, the New York Times, Long Reads, Garden and Gun, Electric Literature, BuzzFeed Reader, Literary Hub, Hyphen, and CNN Philippines, along others. Her essay, Carefree White Girls, Careful Brown Girls, is anthologized in A Map is Only One Story, 20 Writers on Immigration, Family, and the Meaning of Home. Cinelle was a contributing editor, instructor, and writer at Catapult and served as a juror for the inaugural Pulitzer Prize for Memoir. She is a writer. She is a storyteller. She is the physical manifestation of hope through her creativity. She's also answered the question, can you tell us who you are, with, I'm a writer who makes friends on travels. Even though we didn't travel, this is a podcast. I feel like we just made friends. Cinelle's latest book, which just published earlier this month, A Way Home, a memoir of losing yourself and the beauty of returning, in which Cinelle reflects her thoughtful and introspective journey from what began as an ordinary day of writing. Grounded in kindness, compassion, and love, which is then reflected back to her from her family, friends, and community as she writes A Way Back Home, which I'm so excited to talk about today.
Thank you so much, Jen, for having me. I can already tell that you really just embraced this book and embraced me as you learned about me. So I'm really grateful. I just I just know that had we been traveling together, we would have made friends. We would have gone for the same excursions, or, tried out the
Absolutely.
same foods.
For sure. I mean, you even start the book off, if I'm looking at the first line, Dear reader, I'm so grateful that you and I are here. Immediately, as a writer, connecting to the reader in a very thoughtful, intentional way, very conversational, in a very genuine way. And then you begin to share your story. So can we talk a little bit about writing a little bit on that ordinary day? You're at a coffee shop writing a travel essay.
Yeah, I had just gone home. I had just gotten home from a travel assignment for Travel and Leisure, and I was on deadline. It was a really fast turnaround for a story. I had just reported on the 20th kind of mark of Hurricane Katrina and how communities along the Gulf Coast have recovered from it. So already I was telling a recovery story. I was also writing, had two Google Docs open. I was writing the end of what I thought was the end of A Way Home when I just heard this thunderclap and had this sudden severe headache. I never got headaches before then. And when everything just started to spin around me, it was like in a sci-fi movie. Everything, the coffee cup, the pen, the charger, the man next to me, all lifted off the ground and started spinning around me, orbiting me in full speed. And my first thought was my something I had touched or eaten was laced. I don't know. I was just drugged really severely. So, and then I started to become really photosensitive and couldn't see well. And then my neck locked in place. And I realized, no, I know what this is because I actually lost a friend in college to a brain aneurysm rupture. And that's the only way I knew what the signs were pointing to. And because I had already lost some functions, the thing that I could rely on, like I said, I was in the middle of two Google Docs. My laptop was still open and Google was open on one of the tabs, and I was able to click on it, type my husband's workplace name, and just hit the trackpad until it hit the call button on Google Maps. And from there, the front desk at his work answered, and I said, Cinelle Barnes, Stephen's wife, medical emergency. I'm writing where I'm always writing. And that was the message she ran away with
Wow.
and found him, I think, talking to a colleague or making copies or something. But yeah, moments later, when I was already doubled over in my seat, he arrived and, just folded me over his arm and dragged me out of there, put me in the car. And when he said urgent care, I said, no, this is emergency room.
Right.
And immediately, looking back at all my medical documents, and that's what I do as a memoirist,
Of
right?
course. Right.
Looking through my chart and all the doctor's notes and everything, the biggest thing from that day in red, in bold, all caps was, she is ill appearing. And so from the moment I walked into the ER, the nurses knew something was really wrong with me and I needed attention right away. And I had mere hours to get life-saving surgery. And I did. And I woke up from it, although with some deficits and disabilities and symptoms that would present themselves one after the other. I made it. And that is why I opened the book with, Dear Reader, I am so glad that I'm so grateful that you and I are here. Because to me, the act of not just completing this book, but the act of it, the magic of it reaching someone's hands really is so miraculous. The act of someone opening it and reading that first page to me is so miraculous that I felt like I needed to meet whoever was, holding the book with that message right away. I am so glad that you and I are here.
I think it is such a compelling opening. It's the equivalent, I think, if for readers and you being the writer, memoirist, of holding space for somebody to be able to share your story and to learn from it. So the gratitude comes across loud and clear on the page on many different levels. And at the same time, I can't help but think about you were writing a story about New Orleans. And first of all, the fact that it's been over 20 years, still kind of time just, I don't quite understand it anymore. But the fact that you were writing on that and about recovery. And one of the things that you talked about is your takeaway from that visit was that through creativity, they found hope. And so I can't help but parallel that to the story that you're telling in A Way Home, that as you're reconciling with the traumatic brain injury and at the same time Going Home to the Philippines. Both are recovery stories in and of themselves, which I believe any reader that picks it up will be inspired by you, by your story. I think people will find hope in the story, whether it's they themselves that have been impacted or a loved one, to know that you you are more than the bad thing that happened to you.
Yes. Yes, definitely. We are all, and that I know there's not just one type of reader, but I know that all of us are recovering from something, including my cat's attack on the computer just now. But we are all recovering from something. That I know. And so there's 100 and 100 chances that the person who opens the book and sees the message, I am grateful that you and I are here. If that's all they walk away with, I'm happy.
It is
Because from the stories I've told, from the reporting I've done, from the lives I've lived, I know we are all recovering from something. We are all going through something. We all have just gone through something. And it was so important. I still have my notes from that reporting trip to the Gulf, to the New Orleans area. And of course, I still had that notebook with me,
right.
the ER, the OR, the ICU, and like the neuro unit. Like I had those notes with me. And when I was trying to grasp at like elements of who I am and, what it is that I do in the world, in my own handwriting, I had written something like, to be creative is to hope. Like that was my takeaway from the Katrina story. And that really did. Like that gave me so much at every round of treatment and surgery and rehab and writing this book. That message was resonant because it's true for all of us. Like we all need to hope and we all don't know how to. And I luck of finding that message because I was on this reporting trip that showed me to be creative is to hope.
Right.
And so, yeah,
So well captured in this story. And I think one of the things you said early on, that your goal with writing is of this book, A Way Home, is hoping that reading expands your understanding of a memoir from a mere retelling of what happens to an individual to capturing of how the individual affects the world. I mean, that's in your note to the reader. And I think absolutely it is a very personal invitation. I mean, there's marketing and advertising for everything. But when somebody personally invites you and says, Cinelle, there's this great new Thai restaurant down the street, I think you'd really like it, you're more inclined to go than if you happen to see it on a billboard or written up. Not no disrespect to the work that you did for Travel and Leisure. I'd go anywhere you wrote about. But I think that that's that personal connection. So people now are invested in you, in your story. And while, yes, there may have been some deficits, the overriding kindness, intelligence, compassion, that was not touched at all by what happened to you. And to see this captured is incredible. And I think what I hope people realize is right now we're talking and you look fantastic. You sound fantastic. You've written this amazing memoir that everybody's going to go and read. But there was a period, the in the meantime part, from when that actually happened, from sitting in that coffee shop or where you always write to being here now, that was tough.
yeah,
That was gritty, that was not easy, that had to have you kind of questioning some things like, why you?
questioning everything. I even questioned if I was the person everyone said I was. I questioned if I really was the writer that everyone said I was, if I lived in the house that I'm in right now. For a long time, I kept referring to the experience as feeling like either furniture in the house that this man and this girl like live in, and or feeling like I was a placeholder for this woman that people were writing letters to and was getting emails from an editor and an agent, or the woman that the nurses were so keen on like playing games with or you know, coloring pages with. I felt like I was just there in costume or cosplaying because there was such a gap between what they said I could do and what I was capable of in the moment. And, everything from my stamina to my cognitive functions like my memory, my short term memory, my ability to hold two thoughts at once, my word recall was so poor. The highest I was scoring for a while was 3 out of 10. I could repeat 3 out of 10 words that was, given to me. Or I didn't have my left periphery and I couldn't see very much through the corner of my left eye. Or I was just walking really slow and unsteadily. And all the things that had been this collective bread and butter for me as a travel writer and a memoirist. My mobility, my memory, my language were gone when, the brain is a kind of this big use it or lose it situation. And you're so kind to say, oh, the kindness, the intelligence, the compassion are untouched. I had to learn that my cognition was separate from those things and was separate, especially from my intelligence or my ability to write. It was separate from my ability to relate with people. But everything just felt so disheveled. And when my neuropsychologist, was begging me, you have to write, you have to try to write again. You have to finish this essay in this book because it's what's ultimately going to make you better. You have, the more you do, the more you can do was, the whole thesis she was trying to prove. And I was so afraid of my own inabilities that I wouldn't do it for such a long time. And finally, when I met my grief therapist, my second grief therapist, she said, Cinelle, you're not what you've lost. You have to become what you have, not what you've lost. And I was like, what does that mean? And she
Right.
said, your brain and life may have changed, but your heart, which is where your work and your worth come from, remains the same. And so when you say you still have this kindness and this compassion and this intelligence, I started to understand the things that make me who I am and make me the writer that I am, the lyrical, place-based writer that I am,
Right.
are the things that my heart is made of. And those things I have with me forever. So no, I did not have my full vocabulary at the time. I did not have all my sensorial, visual, cinematic memories anymore. But I slowly recreated from that little starter dough of the three things you just mentioned.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's amazing because you talk about you being a writer, a travel writer before all of this happened. And through this book, you also take us on a journey. You take us on a few. One, we go to Jamaica vacation, which you capture that sense of setting so well and that sense of how we feel when we're on vacation and how we're somewhat taken care of while we're on vacation. So do you want to talk a little bit about the trip to Jamaica and kind of what you learned and what you took away from some of that?
Yeah, I can't believe that was 4 years ago. And I only know that it has been 4 years because the World Cup just started yesterday.
I know, I'm super excited.
I am too. And that last trip was during the last World Cup. So that's how I mark time. But trip was really my first international trip with my best friends. And we're all immigrant daughters. We all have had our own share of traumatic experiences. We all have had, you know, generational burdens passed down to us. And we all grew up to be just these most responsible, high achieving kids. I mean, what's a Filipino, a daughter, a Nigerian daughter, and a Korean daughter to do? We are going to achieve. we're going to achieve the heck out of life. And what does all that achievement do? It really burns you out. So I had this wild idea one day. I was like, well, what if? What if? Right? We
Those are the
just
best
took a
questions.
break. What if
Right.
we just took a break? What if we went on vacation together? What if we didn't do anything for just a couple of days? What if we allowed ourselves to be taken care of? What if, like, what if we were the people in the travel magazines? And sure enough, we were kind of good at it. And it was really, yeah, and it was really important for us. And I think it's now become tradition actually for us to go somewhere together, even if it's just, to DC together or for everyone to come down to Charleston. But it is so special to one, find your chosen family, to find your nearest and dearest. And then it's so special to have the time and the resources to be able to gather and travel and leisure.
It it is a wonderful chosen family you have, and I love the fact that you refer to your husband and daughter as the two. Like, it's just a very sweet term of endearment that you repeat throughout. So the other thing that you do in this book is you acknowledge that you have a great family and friends, chosen family, friends, community around you that you didn't recover by yourself, that you had to rely. And I have to imagine it's hard to rely on other people when you're so fiercely independent that, traveling all over to write about that experience and having to accept help and things that you once were able to do that's going to take you a little bit of time to do again.
Yeah, that was probably one of the hardest, most humbling parts of this whole journey. It still is. As your needs change, your reliance on other people changes as well. But I was fortunate enough to have a friend tell me early on in a card that was mailed to the hospital. It said, let the web of friends and family you've created catch you. And that was the message I needed to hear then, because I kid you not, even on the gurney, I'm being wheeled for an emergency surgery. I'm telling my husband, can you please tell Tin House I'm going to teach that we're going to delay the class and we're going to do this. And can you please
Wow.
call this number? I have a one-on-one, like, private writing lesson with her. Can you tell her, well, like, giving him instructions on everything that I had programmed myself to do so efficiently on my own. And when the nurses finally took that laptop away from me, it was,
You still had the laptop with you in the hospital?
I still had it. I still had the laptop with me at the hospital. They really should have taken my phone away too, because I was still texting, people like, I think I was supposed to do this. And my agent was like, we got it.
Yeah.
Stop, just recover, rely on us. And when that card arrived and I opened it and it said, let us catch you,
Gave you permission.
it gave me permission to do what I've been destined to do what my people, the Filipinos,
Mhm.
are born to do. Are one of our biggest values as a people is kapwa, which is this sense of a shared inner self, this just strong sense of community, of solidarity and being there for one another. And I guess I had just been so used to being there for everybody else. And if you read my debut memoir, Monsoon Mansion, I survived all of it by
Right.
myself as a child, and I had programmed myself to become fiercely independent and strong-willed. And what I maybe missed about the communities recovering from Katrina was that they had to do it together. And so along the way, I had to learn that lesson myself.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because you talk about in this book, as well as your debut memoir, about growing up in the Philippines and the childhood trauma that you experienced, which I think nobody should have to experience, and yet you did. And so perhaps in some way it may have prepared you to face this next gritty circumstance. But I'm thinking about a line that you used that says, I rarely found time or reason to be happy because I was too busy being strong.
That's
And like,
it.
that's it. And at the same time, you talk about your people and that inner self, that sense of community. And then at the same time, that inner self and sense of community is basically torn from you when you're put on a plane and end up in California at the age of 17,
16.
16.
Yeah.
And how traumatic that has to be in and of itself to not only be in a new country and trying to navigate, we'll just say the system, which is a challenge in and of itself, but to no longer have that same sense of community, that same sense of inner self that you grew up with. And going back home, like 20 years after the fact, this is a big part of your story as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about what it was like growing up, leaving, and then coming back?
Yeah. I mean, I grew up the biggest paradox ever, which is that I grew up in this really opulent mansion. I was born to formerly, how should I say, formerly successful parents whose demise just coincided with my birth. And so by the time they were falling from grace, I was growing up and coming of age. And most of that growing up and coming of age happened in this mansion that on the outside looked palatial and was ornamented and was glittery. On the inside was literally and figuratively crumbling into itself. We had termites eating up, the floors. We didn't have running water. We didn't have electricity. And very early on, especially after my father left, my mother figured out that I had this writing ability. And so since a young age, I've been competing in writing contests and have been winning her prize money. And if not prize money, at least, a good enough reputation so that this like elite school I was enrolled in would continue to give me, know, my stay, my spot at that school because I could compete in all sorts of academic and creative competitions for this school. So early on, I was a resource for my mom. And then later on, when I was, more liability than asset, I guess, since she had a very transactional business like view of our relationship. I was relinquished for an international adoption at the age of 16 when I already had this full identity and really full life in the Philippines. And that international adoption led to my becoming undocumented in the United States because family court and immigration court don't really communicate with one another, and family law and immigration law don't really align. There are so many of us here in the United States who have fallen, quote unquote, out of status, even though we are sons and daughters of American citizens. We ourselves are not. But that's the main reason why I had such a dicey relationship with travel for so long because of this, transcontinental trip I made at age 16 that drastically changed my life and made it even harder. Uh, and again, put me in a situation in which I had to buckle up again, be strong again, and be resilient again. And I was too busy being strong to be happy for so long, which is why by the time I had a passport, which is just right before the pandemic, by the time I had a valid American passport, I said, screw it, the travel as much as I
Right.
can and reclaim my identity as a traveler, reclaim my narrative as someone who crosses borders and oceans. And I'm going to live the story I want to tell. And that is, I am someone who makes friends on travels.
Yes.
I am someone who's willing to jump off waterfalls and try new foods and costume up and do whatever dance you tell me to do.
Yeah.
I will talk to everyone and anyone I will do it. Whatever whatever the Danes or the Germans or the Brits or the Jamaicans tell me to do, the Puerto Ricans tell me to do, I will do it simply because I almost didn't have the chance to.
That and I think you're the type of person that's curious and a lifelong learner, so you
Mhm.
embrace those opportunities to see a different perspective, different food, different dance, different music. I mean, I had a great time traveling back with you all to the Philippines in this book. I was mesmerized by the fireflies, completely mesmerized by that and just was like, "Wow, that is so special." The talking about food and how food is a big part of the culture that brings people together. And I think anytime you break bread with people, right, there's that
Mhm.
sense of community. You captured that. You captured the song, the Sinulog Festival.
Sinulog, yeah.
Yeah, I was just like, wow, I want to go.
Yes, you have
Just
to go.
I looked up the music and, like, have been hooked, so that's what I've been, like, listening to in the mornings, like, it's the get ready to go take on the day at the library kind of, music that it's just there's so many different things, but they come together and they just work. Like, there's a whole Zen lesson in and of that, but I just think you captured that sense of place so well. I mean, even sitting outside at dinner, I love the fact that you all started a ping pong tournament at one point and then just like quietly stepped away. Like you're the ones that kind of get people going and engaged in doing and then just quietly like back out.
We've joked that we should be hired out, the three of us, my two and I. We
Yes.
should be hired out to wedding companies, to like bridal companies. Like we can be part of the DJ package. We're the people that like warm up the dance floor or like get everybody talking and cheering everybody on. But that's definitely who we are at home, in sports, anywhere really, while traveling. That's also how I am with other writers. Like I just want to cheer all of us on. Like I know how hard it is to write a book and how
It's
hard it is
incredibly
to get it
hard.
published. And you know, everyone just needs a cheerleader, I think. And like you said, I'm just a very curious person. Do you know who I learned that from? This is going to be so wild. No, I don't know if anyone listening guessed that they were going to hear the name Kobe Bryant today,
Would
but
not have figured that's the direction this was going to go, but so glad it did.
yeah, but I've always been a big sports fan, thanks to my brother. I myself was an athlete, and of course, my whole family now, we're all, really into sports. But there's an interview with Kobe Bryant from way back when. And, when a interviewer asked him, like, what motivates you? Is it your passion for winning or your fear of losing? And he said, neither. Yeah, he said, neither. He said, because neither are sustainable. And you will be devastated each time if those are your goals. And he said, my only motivation is to learn. Both winning and losing will teach you something, and every person you meet will teach you something, and every experience, if you're open to it, every curiosity will be repaid, tenfold. And seeing that interview as like a tween or teen, I just remember like, I'm going to hold on to that. And I've seen it on social media, like it's made its like rounds again. And I'm like, yes, that's actually necessary for us all. But specifically for me, having survived the brain aneurysm and acquiring this brain injury, curiosity is vitamin for the brain. You know, it's, I lost a good chunk of my brain because of the hemorrhage. And the only way to grow it back was to remain open and curious, and then to take what's given to you and like just run away with it. And well, I say run, but it was more of a crawl writing this
Yeah.
book.
But still, the point is you're moving forward with that
Mhm,
and with
mhm.
that commitment and that mindset. You reference a lot of great people throughout this book, and I think, sometimes we're reading a book and there's something that jumps out on the page that's exactly what we need to hear at that time. And your quote from James Baldwin that I read, I have a friend who's going through a difficult time, and I was reading that just after I had texted her to check and see how she's feeling. And then I was like, this is exactly what I'm supposed to send to her. Like, I love how books just become such an integral part of our lives. And the I was reading this when this happened. It's a gift that you all have.
Books are magic. Books are magic. I wanted to become a writer because I remember being a little girl in that dark mansion reading by candlelight. And I would just receive a message from someone in England or the US or Singapore or India. And it felt like that message was specifically written for me, even though I'm sure that author wasn't thinking of me at all. And yeah, books are magic in that way. I still I still feel that way. I still believe that it is one of the best portals through which genuine human connection can happen.
Without a doubt, I think they say that people who read books tend to be more empathetic, and I think it's because as storytellers, you give us the opportunity to inhabit that individual's life, and you do such a great job writing that it's if I'm there. I felt like I was on the boat with you, and the guy who's pushing with the gigantic bamboo stick, like,
Mhm,
felt like
mhm.
I was sitting right alongside. And then, of course, like, there's a moment where you kinda giggle and your daughter starts giggling, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, these are my people," because you get the giggles when everything's supposed to be quiet, and then just your body's shaking because 'cause you're trying not to make noise, but felt like I was there. Felt like I was there when you were at the festival and you're in the mall and you're getting stuff to wear and all the bright colors and watching the music and watching the performers, and it's just such a gift that I felt like I attended it even though I haven't yet.
It's good.
Yeah.
That's really what I want. I want you all. And again, I'm so obsessed about the brain now, as you can tell.
Right.
The brain, for the most part, can tell the difference between what you're actually experiencing and what you're reading or what you're watching. There are these things in our brains called mirror neurons, meaning when, for example, when you're learning a new thing, and someone's demonstrating something to you, you watching that demonstration is registered in your brain as you almost having done it. So these mirror neurons prep your brain, and they kind of are these proxy neurons for when you're ready to try the activity. You already have kind of this built-in capacity to do it. And so when you talk about empathy, truly reading about people, reading about the world gives you these mirror neurons that allow you to truly see the world and experience the world, so that when you yourself are in that situation, or when you yourself meet that person, or when you yourself go to that, it
Right.
already has this kind of practice mechanism in place.
Maybe it explains that sense of deja vu, like, you feel like you've
Uh-huh.
been there before, done that before, met that person before, or something to kind of to capture that. And that gift that you give to your daughter as well. I mean, there's lines that, repeat throughout your book about wanting to give your daughter the world, and at the same time, you also say, "But you gave it to yourself first,"
Yes.
which I
I
think
mean,
is
that's
the distinction.
that's what they teach us on planes, right? Put
Right.
your mask on first before helping anybody else. And I think all of us need to hear that over and over and over again. On planes, off planes, you really can't give what you don't have. And if you are pouring from an empty bucket, man, then everyone's in trouble, because we don't know what you're pouring into that fire is air, not water. And that's the same for writing, right? If you're not reading, you're likely not equipping yourself for a good writing day. If you are not curious about the world and going out there to actually experience it, you can't write a story with a strong sense of place. And yeah, we all need to help ourselves first and fill our own buckets first.
Yeah, you do a great job. There's a line in the book where travel makes you braver because it halts or at least dilutes your fear, not of what's out there, but what you thought you didn't already have within you. And the greatest lengths point back inside.
Always.
I mean,
Always.
yeah, it's just there's so many beautiful snippets of language throughout this book, throughout this story, and feeling like we're right there alongside you. In my intro, I talk about getting to know writers and become fiercely loyal. I will always champion you in your books because of the story and because of the message that you were telling your story, but it resonates with so many of us because some of it is so universal. Like we might not all experience a brain aneurysm, but we've all experienced the sense of belonging. And growing up having immigrated here from the Philippines, somebody asks you at what point, an editor, like, which is home, the United
Mhm.
States or Philippines? And like without hesitation, you immediately said the Philippines, and that
Yeah,
sense of identity and sense of that's where you grew up. And the fact that it was taken from you, and I'm glad to say that you could reconcile 20 years
yeah.
later, go back to a place that you never thought you would be back or have
I
the
remember
opportunity to go back.
I remember, that conversation you're referring to, an editor friend said, "Why do you still call the Philippines home?" And he'd also grown up in the Philippines, and I remember responding with, because I was ripped from it, and so there's still an unfinished salvage to that whole part of my life, and I think that's true for us all. For home is not static. Home might not even be one place. Home often comes with ruptures, right? Not everyone has had a brain aneurysm rupture, but everyone has experienced some kind of rupture. For many of us, the places or people we consider home, or the places and people we think of when we hear the word home, those places very much have stories that feel unfinished. I think that's true for so many of us. We're all still reconciling something. And if you're reconciling something with somewhere, that somewhere is likely home to you one way or another.
Right. Was the fact that you traveled back there after experiencing such traumatic events as a child,
Mhm.
was it at all therapeutic to go back and see it in a different lens 20 years later and have that space and distance, not of physical, like from one
Mhm.
country to another, but also time?
I mean, it was more than therapeutic. It was healing. It didn't necessarily bring closure because, you can't fix the past. You can't undo what I had to survive growing up, but it at least gave me another way of seeing a country that, I say in the book almost killed me. And it gave me new memories with my two. And it allowed me to be tour guide, and it allowed me to design a whole experience around joy and love and all these things, ease, like comfort, all these things that weren't the words I immediately associated with the Philippines. Again, going back to curiosity, I was open to the idea of telling a different story about this place. I was open to the fact that two truths can exist at once.
As
A
something I think
place,
we all struggle with. 2
all
things
of
are true
us.
at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, I think of the way I put it in the book is a place that almost killed me can also love me. And I think that's so true for so many Americans.
Right,
We
right.
all uproot at some point for some reason or another. So many in the pandemic boomeranged back to where they grew up and found themselves building new lives and telling new stories about these places that they once deserted, that they vowed they would never go back to, you know?
Right. I think there's some very healthy perspective about the way you frame that, that you're not overwriting a narrative. You just have a new perspective. And so you're creating a new story. Like the story didn't end when you left the Philippines. And now going back, your story continues, but it's framed with a different perspective with who you're with, you're two, and experiencing the best that it has to offer in terms of the culture and the community and that, I guess, ease to be there and not feel a lot of the things that you felt sadly growing up.
Yeah, it was just really a reclamation of sorts, and sometimes you just gotta give joy a chance. You
Right?
know, it's summertime. We all gotta give joy a chance.
Yeah, absolutely. Although I'm gonna, try to give Joy a chance in Cleveland in January.
That's also true. I talk about, the things you take home with you from travel. Every time I'm somewhere cold now, or even here in Charleston, South Carolina, it does get cold sometimes. And I still have to go on my walks as part of my, rehab. And I just tell myself, remember that one time you were in Germany and it was 1 degree outside and these children were at the park playing?
Yeah.
Be those children. That's what I tell myself.
Right. Well, I can remember as a kid. Yeah, you grow up with it. So you're out sled riding and you're building snowmen and you're doing all the things. Somehow you become an adult and you're like, yeah, no, had enough. This has been a great conversation and thinking about as we're about to wrap up, this is Stories End, the final 5 questions.
Ooh.
So you mentioned early on in the book that when you travel, you immediately, kind of plug into the movie on the airplane.
Mhm.
And you mentioned you love horror. What is your favorite horror movie?
Ooh, I don't ooh, that's so hard. I don't know if I have a favorite one,
Okay.
but recently I saw Backrooms, and that was a whole other kind of eerie, and I do recommend, I recommend it. I highly recommend it. So, of the newer, horror films, that's definitely at the top. Get Out is something I've watched over
Yeah.
and over and over again, mostly on planes. I can tell you my least favorite. Anything that has Freddy Krueger in it, I don't know why, but Freddy that's one I can't shake off, even after I've, left the plane and the airport and I'm in a totally different time zone. I still feel like Freddy is still there
Yeah.
next to me.
You talk about Philippine culture and food is important. And you say that recipes are the best souvenirs. So according to your two, what do they often request that you make for them?
Ooh, they love when I make jerk chicken,
Okay.
which is from our Jamaica trip.
Hmm.
Recently, they gave me the thumbs up when I made cardamom buns, which I survived on in Copenhagen. And because of my chronic fatigue and my inability to focus sometimes, I've now relied very much on semi-homemade recipes. And so the cardamom buns are definitely a semi-homemade recipe. For all the readers, you can
Yes.
use store-bought crescent roll dough,
Hmm.
unravel the triangles,
Right.
piece together the triangles so that they form a rectangle, and then cut the rectangle into strips. And then you just lather on cardamom butter, literally just butter with ground cardamom in it and some sugar.
I can smell it already right now.
Oh, yeah, it smells so good. It's sweet and aromatic and a little spicy, a little nutty. And 12 minutes in the oven, you'll feel like you're in Copenhagen.
Yeah. Guess what I'm having tomorrow? So there's another wonderful story in this book where you were learning to crab with your dear friends and how it brought you joy and it brought them joy. What lesson would you teach me to bring me joy?
Ooh, like an activity? Okay. Something I've always wanted to try that I'm willing to try with you for the first time is going on a color hunt, like going somewhere and then choosing a color. So you and I will each choose a color and then we just take photos or sketch vignettes of images that are of that color and then just, you know, report to each other at the end of the day. Hey, this is what I saw and this is what I saw. Because I think it will really physically open your eyes and slow you down. A lot of us travel and just want to get the Instagram photo, and if you had an assignment like that, you're forced to slow down, look at something, look for something, and then tell the story to a friend later on.
Such a great lesson in general. I mean, I know when we talk about something, we'll have a hyper awareness of it, but I like the fact that you're very deliberate and intentional with what you're looking for. So you experience that in a different way. Love
Mm-hmm.
it. Okay. Well, we are definitely going to do that. Even if it's like
Great.
virtually, we will do that.
We'll do that.
Like me, you were also a soccer player. Who do you think is going to win the World Cup?
Oh my gosh, I don't know, but South Korea won last night, so I'm hopeful for them. And I love a few of the guys there. I'm sort of hopeful for Team USA, but this is a tough one because the rosters have changed so much from this year compared to
To the last one.
yeah, to the last one. And so we have a lot of new players on every team. And I think that's why I'm rooting for South Korea is because they still all feel familiar to me. And truthfully, I'm going to be a copycat here. Ireland did not qualify, but they are rooting for the Ivory Coast because it's always just this historic, qualification. And I think this is maybe only their second or third World Cup. And what's cool is that if you flip the Irish flag around, it becomes the Cote d'Ivoire flag. I thought that was cool. So
That's very cool.
yeah. So I know those are wild cards, but I love a wild card. So I'll go with Ivory Coast and South Korea. And yeah.
I think that's going to be fantastic for sure. And then the final question, what song is always on a road trip playlist for you?
I just wrote an essay for Large Hearted Boy, which is a music and literature publication. And it's a playlist of all the songs that help bring me back to myself as I completed A Way Home. And a song from there that is on repeat in our car is Gemini and Leo by Helado Negro. And it's a little disco-y. I don't really know if that's a genre, but it's very disco adjacent. And it just gets you into a good driving mood, I think. And of course, I'm a Gemini and my husband's a Leo.
So
And
perfect.
yeah, it's just perfect.
Thank you to everybody who is listening. An even bigger thank you to you, Cinelle Barnes, whose new book, A Way Home, A Memoir of Losing Yourself and the Beauty of Returning, just published 2 weeks ago. Or perhaps I should say, Salamat. Yeah! If you are looking for a memoir that poses big questions with firsthand experiences as possible answers, this is the book for you. If you are looking for a story of a remarkable woman who has defied the odds in many ways and lives a life of meaning and purpose, this is the book for you. If you want to travel to New York, New Orleans, Jamaica, and Philippines without having to leave, all you need to pack is your head and your heart, which will certainly expand as you see things from a thoughtful perspective. I'd like to end with a line in your acknowledgments. This was a note to yourself, but I think we can ask everybody to do the same. May you continue to fight entropy, defy the norm, and live deep into the person you were meant to be. Thank you for showing up and being an example of just that. To find out who else is visiting, go to storytocount.com. This is Story to Count with Jen Jumba.
Thank you so much.